Success Stories, and I'm your host, Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean in the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. Success Stories is a show that highlights the lives and careers of people who have accomplished great things. And I'm here with one such person today, Miss Jessica Taylor, a candidate for the United States Senate. Jessica Taylor was born and raised in Calhoun County, Alabama. She earned a bachelor's and master's degree from Jacksonville State University. She's a graduate of Faulkner Law right down the road from this studio where we sit today. She began her career working in the office of Governor Riley, then founded her own business, Azimuth Grants, became CEO, and has really taken off. She ran for Congress a couple years ago and is now running for the United States Senate. Jessica, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be with you and talk a little bit about this race and Azimuth.
Well, let's begin with the race. I'll just ask you a sort of a big, broad question to begin with. Why are you running for the United States Senate?
I'm running for United States Senate because I think we've got to have a conservative outsider who can go up there and fix this mess. What I see coming out of D.C. is alarming, from the federal government mandates to the outrageous, out-of-control spending, the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, and now the border crisis and the supply chain crisis right now. All of these things the administration is handling so poorly, and that's what we've seen from the leadership in D.C. We've got to convince people that the federal government should not be controlling our lives and running this programming. We need to return power back to the locals, the people, local and state governments, and so that's why I'm running. We need a business-minded, conservative outsider to go fix it.
Well, and as a businesswoman, you're very familiar with red tape and regulations and all the struggles that businesses have to go through in order to operate efficiently and effectively. I want to hear a lot more about Azimuth Grants because it's a fascinating story. You and I were talking actually over lunch today about the company and how you built it up from scratch. It's a fascinating story, and it really shows your resilience and tenacity. And so I'd love for our readers and listeners, I guess, to hear about that process because it really is so fascinating.
Sure. So I really fell into it initially. When I was working in the governor's office, I got asked to lead a high school dropout prevention program. And when I went to run that program, I realized the only funding was for my salary. So if I was going to do any sort of programming or activities, I had to, raise money. And when you work for the government, you do that by writing grant applications, essentially putting together a business plan and giving it to a grantor who will then select from multiple submissions which application is the best, and that's the one that gets funding. So it's highly competitive, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. I was in law school at night, so I had learned how to synthesize complex text, and a lot of times these requests for proposals are 150 pages to even read the guidance before you can submit a proposal.
Yeah.
So I got good at putting those together and then managing a few statewide projects, and more and more people kept calling and asking for my advice and help on how to put successful proposals together. So at the end of law school, I had a semester left when the governor went out of office. I took a few contracts just for extra money, and then I got out of law school, passed the bar, fully intending to practice law, but more people kept calling, and I realized this was the real niche and what I enjoyed doing, working with these community organizations, because I get to work with school systems, individual schools, two-year colleges, universities, municipalities, county governments, state agencies, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and even some for-profits. So all of these entities, I get to understand intimately how they work and put together proposals for them to compete for much-needed community funding in both the private and public sector. So I transitioned to managing this business full-time. I didn't know it at the time, but I was an entrepreneur. So I'm somewhat of a self-taught business person. I read every book I could get my hands on and decided I wanted to scale that company. So for the last 11 years, I've been working to do that. We've now got a team of consultants across the globe. Right now we're up to 34 folks, and everybody has their various subject matter expertise, but we work virtually. We've been a virtual firm for about 7 years now. I had 3 children in 4 years and needed my time to be flexible, so that was one of the key drivers to build a virtual firm, and just so happens in today's environment that's been very beneficial, and we're able to work with all these great projects around the world, and that's what's given me such tremendous insight into how government funding works at every level, or rather how it does not work at every level, how much more efficient private sector organizations are compared to their government counterparts, and that's why I'm such a passionate fiscal conservative.
And you have 3 children, and you're able to balance your work life with your children very well. Tell us how How do you go about doing that?
I'm very intentional about my time. You know, they say what gets calendared gets done, and what's on there are your priorities. So I try to cut out as much just wasteful time as I can. You know, if I catch myself sitting there scrolling through social media, I think, is this really the best use of my time? I could be reading all of those various emails from either work or campaign or my children's lives. And so it's being very organized, and I have a tremendous network of support. You know, I lived in the Montgomery-Prattville area for 15 years, Montgomery first and then Prattville, and we just have moved to Birmingham, which is closer to my family and wonderful. So I truly am blessed to have a network of support, and you just do the best you can. You know how it is.
I know how it is. Well, you're good at time management, and I bet that time working during the day and going to law school at night really helped you to learn that skill. I mean, time management is not something you're just born knowing. You have to cultivate it.
You have to cultivate it, and you have to be intentional about your priorities. I actually use something called the Full Focus Planner. It's a system by Michael Hyatt, if you're familiar with his work, but it has you at the beginning of each year set out your goals and priorities, and then you revisit those, of course, every quarter, but monthly and even weekly, so that when you set your goals for that week, you're making sure that they are your goals and not necessarily things that have been punted at you. You have to learn how to say no to a lot. I think when you're really trying to go after a goal, you need to remember what that goal is and almost be single-minded in the pursuit of it. So I do that and just try my best.
You know, we Southerners have a hard time saying no because it seems impolite to us. Sometimes we don't want to say no, but you got to learn how to do it. Are you the type of person that wakes up every morning and makes a to-do list, and you have to go through item by item and say, check it off, this is what I need to do today?
No, because I do it the night before, and I wake up, and I've adopted daily rituals. That's also part of this Michael Hyatt system, and it sounds very constrictive, but it's actually freeing when you get that habit developed and you know what you're going to do. So I wake up each day, and I know the first thing for me is I'm going to make coffee, I'm going to get a little bit of fruit to try to be healthy, and then I'm going to do my devotional. And then I open my planner and see what have I set are my top 3 goals for the day. I set them the day before, and I do have checklists that I move to the next day or, you know, fully organized. But once I start that day, I have to implement it. And so much of the day, when you get really busy, turns into playing defense. Those early morning hours are when you could play offense. So they've always been my favorite. I'm an early riser, and I like to get up before the rest of the world so that I can play offense until the stuff starts coming in, and you got to play defense.
Well, you are anything but a procrastinator, that is for sure. So tell us about your growing up in Calhoun County, about any teachers who influenced you, and about how your parents were influential to you. I'd love to hear some more about that.
Sure. So my parents are high school sweethearts. They are actually born on the same day, 2 years apart,
wow.
which is pretty cool. And then both sets of my grandparents lived in the small little town of Weaver, Alabama in Calhoun County. We had one 4-way stop. That's how we gave our directions. And I certainly couldn't get into any trouble because somebody was going to tell them. My grandparents at either end, aunts and uncles. And it was really a wonderful way to grow up. And it was a very diverse community. And so I was fortunate to have a ton of friends that I met there that even though we think differently in our political thoughts, we're still come together and are good friends and able to talk about these hard issues. But it was a wonderful upbringing there, and I started working when I was 16 in a CD shop, and then went back and at Jacksonville State, which is not far away, waited tables and worked for a real estate firm in their marketing department. And you know, so certainly that work ethic at a young age was something my parents instilled in me, and still to this day they're very supportive of my efforts and help with the child care when needed. They're much closer, so it was a wonderful place to grow up. In fact, I'll be back there next week. We've got a big meet and greet, and I'm excited to see a lot of my old friends.
And so yeah, the meet and greet thing, what is that like? I've never run a campaign or been, you know, at the forefront of a campaign. It's got to be so busy going around the state, going from here to there, but it's got to be kind of fun and exciting too. You get to meet so many different people. What's that like? It
is exactly what you said. You know, it's new people every day, and it's a big state. You know, we've got 67 counties, and so trying to get to each one of those counties and make sure that you do a mix of meeting with local elected officials there, local businesses, and then any voters. And the meet and greet is a wonderful opportunity for anybody to come. We try to set those up as frequently as we can and just do an all call. Anybody who wants to come by and ask questions, say hello, you know, we welcome you, and we set those up just as much as we can around the state.
Well, so you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. I did not enjoy law school. I've managed to stick around law school and even to be an administrator in a law school for a while, but I did not enjoy law school as a student. Did you enjoy law school as a student?
I did not.
You did not. So you're honest too. That's great.
I did not. Well, I will say there were teachers that I loved and developed relationships with, and of course my peers, but I was working full-time in the governor's office, and I towards the end was pregnant with my first child, and so I got married when I was in law school and had my first child, and so I had other things that were pulling at my attention and time, and I knew too I wasn't trying to go be at a big law firm, and I didn't necessarily need to be that straight A student. I wanted to get this education and apply it wherever I might land, and I never dreamed it would have been as an entrepreneur in the business community, but once I got out and tried things out, realized that was where I was supposed to be. And so it's funny how God puts you in those places in your life and you wind up exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, you can't plan out your life. Too many people think that life is just a formula, and if you check this box, check this box, check this box, then you'll become X or Y. And it's interesting that we get thrown curveballs, and there are different twists and turns, and our plans get disrupted along the way. So I have a daughter. I think we mentioned this earlier when we were talking. My daughter is 7. She turns 8 next week. I know there are probably other little girls that will be watching this show and who look up to someone like you who's able to start her own business and succeed in the business world and accomplish so much and become a lawyer and everything else. What advice do you have for any of those sort of young girls who might be listening and looking to you for advice?
I'll tell them the same thing my daddy told me since as early as I can remember. You can be anything you want to be. If you work hard and try hard and treat other people with kindness and respect, you can go anywhere. And I think one of the things nowadays, we put so much emphasis on academic excellence, and certainly that's important, and being a regimented lifelong learner, in my opinion. I think also getting out there in the real world and working a job, and if you think there's something that you're interested in doing, go volunteer there, be around it. There's power in proximity, and you can learn if that's actually a path that you want to go down. But there are so many options that you can have as a career, and there's nothing that women can't do. So just figure out what it is, where your strengths are, and what you enjoy doing, and that's how you can contribute to the world. And there's almost you can make a job out of just about anything.
Well, it must take a lot of soul searching and contemplation to bring yourself to run for office, whether it's the United States Senate or whether it's the U.S. House of Representatives. It must be a very difficult decision to make. How did you go about that process, making that big decision?
A lot of prayer. Certainly a lot of prayer. I would say that's I spent quite a bit of time doing that and searching, as to whether that was God's will for my life to do this. And I just feel that what I have experienced in my life, coming from small little town in Weaver, Alabama, and getting to travel all across this state and even country, dealing with these programs that are funded by government funding, I've been able to see so many things, and so I feel that it's worth the risk to jump into this race. And so many women, specifically women, are risk averse. And sometimes that can be a strength, but a lot of times it holds us back professionally. And I learned this lesson a long time ago, and I tell groups that I speak to of younger women, you can't be afraid to fail.
Right.
You are going to fail eventually. If you don't fail, you're not pushing the envelope far enough. And so I felt for me that even if I were to not win, I'm able to advance this conversation and go out and spend time doing the things I love, talking about conservatism and talking about ways I see that we can fix government and right side this model that is so wrong with the top-down leadership that we have. And so it was a risk I certainly felt was worth taking to be able to help our country in this way. But it is hard on those running for office, and I think most don't appreciate or realize what a sacrifice it truly is, not just for the candidate, but maybe even more so for their families.
Sure, yeah. And I like to tell my students something similar about failure, that failure is just a step in the process to success. People tend to look at successful individuals and think, wow, they just did everything right every step of the way. But if you really take a closer look at how successful people have accomplished great things, it's through trial and error. It's through messing up a few times, because you have to learn what it is that you need to correct. And so it is a process, and it sounds as if you've gone through different processes. And I remember we were talking earlier about just how when you were starting up Azimuth, it was just a small operation, and it's just grown so much over the years. It's really a fascinating story. What does Azimuth mean?
Sure, it's the horizontal angle of a compass bearing. So we help our clients find their direction towards grant funding. So we came up with that name years ago when we started expanding outside of Alabama, and most people do not know what it means, but
I did not. That's why I asked the question earlier, before the show. But so tell me a little bit about your calculations as the business is starting to grow. Let's go back to early on, when maybe you thought, I don't know if this is going to be successful. I don't know if this is going to work. There had to have been some stress. There had to have been doubts. Have I made the right decision? Do I need to have sort of a backup plan? What was that like when it started working out, when things started connecting and really working? It must have been exciting, but also, probably a little nerve-wracking too.
Absolutely, and it ebbs and flows, It's just like with everything, the pendulum always swings. Just when you think you've got something figured out, circumstances change or some external event happens, and that's why they say entrepreneurs have to be so gritty. You just have to keep pushing through the problems, and there's always going to be problems, and I've found too that as the business has grown, that a lot of times it's the same problems, just at scale, different. So I would say too, when we just mentioned that sometimes failure can be the way forward. You learn more when you don't win. When you win, you don't necessarily sit there and analyze it, but when you lose, you go back and analyze all of these things and nitpick it and find ways to improve. And I think if we're constantly looking to improve our own performances, even when we win, we should go back and look. But constant self-improvement is something that you strive for, and I ask myself in business, who do I need to be as a leader to get this company where it needs to be? Is it providing more resources to my team? A lot of times that is where it is. There's a bottleneck somewhere and they don't know how to ask for help. It's getting in and finding that. And, there's just so many balls you have to keep up in the air as an entrepreneur that you just become good at keeping pushing through problems.
What did you study in college, Jessica?
Political science.
Political science, okay. And then you ended up getting an MPA before law school.
Correct. Well, somewhat overlapping. I actually started off in undergrad as pre-med. I was a huge rural science scholar, and I hated all of the biology and chemistry labs. I didn't enjoy those, and I took a political science class as an elective and loved it. I loved studying history.
What was the class? Was it like
101?
Yeah, 101.
Just intro, and I loved it, and I thought, well, let me take a few more of these. And after a semester of taking additional poli-sci classes, I just changed my major, and then also had a concentration in international relations. I originally wanted to be a foreign service officer with the Department of State, and was in the pursuit of that when I got the opportunity to move to Montgomery, so to work in the governor's office. I actually started law school before I finished my master's program, so there was a semester there where I was in law school working full-time and finishing that master's. So if I ever think that I've had a tough day nowadays, I think back to that and it's not so bad.
Yeah, and you were in the governor's office for what, 3 years?
Yep,
is that correct?
almost 4.
Almost
I came
4.
in at the beginning of second term.
And your role changed while you were there, correct? But you were working in the grants program principally the entire time. Is that
sort
correct?
of? So when I came in, I had a split role, half my time in constituent services and half my time in administration. After a few months, I went full-time in administration, processing out-of-state travel requests, inventorying China at the governor's mansion. I mean, it was different every week, but it was really a fun place to work, and getting to see the inner workings of an executive branch agency was really nice. After that, I got the opportunity to move over to the governor's office of faith-based and community initiatives, and it was to run a high school dropout prevention program. And so I self-taught how to write grants, and when you work for the government and you're successful in getting those, you then turn around and you're managing those grants. So for 2 of those years, I managed a statewide program called Alabama Communities of Excellence, and we would survey all of these communities, what sort of professional development do you want? Every single time, grant writing was the top of that list, and I used the same consultant to train at all of those because so few people did this. And after sitting through 2 years of that and getting to learn how all of these nonprofit and faith-based entities worked, I felt competent to be able to help folks in that way. And so it just started off as some hourly work for extra money, and it's now grown into a firm that I love to manage and has taught me so much. And I very much want to serve the people of Alabama as the next United States Senator, and would trade my baby for that. But I still, if it doesn't work out, I will love what I do and can go back and help in that way.
Well, how much of grant writing is networking? I think a lot of people may have just an idealized conception of grant writing as though you have a great idea, you put it on a piece of paper, you send it, and that's how it works, and that's how you achieve a grant. But grant making is a process, and it's sort of a reciprocal process between writer and grantor and grantee, and it does involve relationship building.
Yes, so we on our end are completely ghost writers when it comes to especially public funding. We'll help our clients if they need to reach out and ask questions. We'll make sure they know the right questions to ask, but we live in the competitive funding space where once the RFP comes out, there'll be a defined question and answer period, and then you can't communicate with them any point after that. So on the private grant side, it can be highly relational, going out and meeting those board of directors.
See, that's my world. My world's in the private grant writing side, so that is principally relationship building in that.
But on the public side, and that's in a way I like it. It's what you put on the four corners of that document stands, and it's really good that we are virtual. A lot of people will say, well, we want to hire in-house, or how can you help us? We do a lot of work in Texas and Wisconsin, kind of all over, and clients will ask, how can you help us if you're not even on site? And I say to them, well, the people reviewing these applications aren't on site. You've got to be able to tell your story in a way that it compels people to fund you on paper. And so we become really good at doing that, whether it's putting their data forward in a compelling way or adjusting the need statement and the narrative to really sell that story. But we're essentially behind the scenes, and so our role, the only relational element that we bring in is if our client needs to identify other community partners to do various elements of the programming that their project would do. And then we'll say, hey, you might want to consider partnering with this local nonprofit or this other governmental agency to make the application stronger, and we'll help them connect if that needs to happen.
Well, there's no such thing as a typical day on the campaign trail. I realize every day is entirely different. But if you were to describe a typical day such as it is, what would it be like? What is it like? I'm imagining that people would want to know, what is it like to get up? I mean, it's got to be a lot of stress, a lot of activity in the mornings, staying up on the issues, communicating with people on the campaign, organizing where you're going to go, scheduling, all this kind of stuff has got to be exhausting.
It is. Fortunately, I have a wonderful team who helps me keep all of that stuff organized, and every day is different. If we're on the road and traveling somewhere, we try to make sure that we, talk to local media if we're there, whether it's radio or doing a TV spot. We try to make sure that we can get somewhere and get our message out in that way. But then setting up one-on-ones with local leaders and local business folks, and then again the meet and greets where we can have anybody come. We try to stack those days when we're in a local community to meet as many people as we can. And then a lot of days, it's call time and being on the phones, reaching out and trying to build those grassroots relationships and the people that you need to help you get on your team and win. So it's a lot of phone time. People don't realize how much somebody might just be on the phone calling people.
Well, then earlier today you were talking with students and meeting with students, and that's got to be fun too, to see energetic young people and people who have their whole lives and careers ahead of them. And it wasn't so long ago when people like us were in that position ourselves.
Oh, I know, it's hard for me to believe it's been 10 years since I was in law school myself, but when I got to walk back into that building today and see those students and remember where I was, it's just really nice to be able to talk to them and tell them the things that I would have wanted to hear, and that's, for me, think about what your end goal is. What do you want your life to look like? Is it a flexible schedule? Is it that you want stability of income? If so, you probably don't want to be an entrepreneur. But think about what you want that end goal to be, and then build a career to that. You can, and especially if you love what you do, find something that you love and you won't work a day in your life.
Well, you must have a high risk tolerance to be somebody who is an entrepreneur, who is willing to go out and start a business, someone who is willing to put herself out as a candidate for office. You must have a high risk tolerance.
That's accurate, yes, for sure. But no risk, no reward. And,
well, that's a great point.
We need people who are fearless in that regard and willing to go out and speak the truth, and also people who know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. We've got a lot of people that jump into races and just dump a bunch of either their own money, or they've got a lot of wealthy friends that can come in and fund that campaign, and certainly money is an important part of the campaign, but we are $29 trillion in debt as a country. We need people who can work out of that deficit, not necessarily just throw more money at problems. And the way we're already moving in this race, you know, one poll had us at 7%, and we have spent close to nothing and haven't done any paid advertising. So that kind of momentum this early on from somebody with essentially no name ID and no money, I'm encouraged by that. And I know how the voters in Alabama want something different. They don't want an establishment candidate. They don't want a career politician. They want a conservative outsider who's business-minded and can go up there and hopefully sell our brand of conservatism, because we are losing on that front, and we're losing the younger generation of conservatives. And we need somebody who can speak to them in their language and convince them that more government is not the answer.
Well, at the end of the day, it's ideas over ideology and principle over party, and so I appreciate your principles and your willingness to stand on them. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Ms. Jessica Taylor, candidate for the U.S. Senate, former CEO of Azimuth Grants, and just a wonderful, impressive person. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fun.
Thank you, Alan. This was great.